You're on.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bill Hunt, Director of the Department of Land Use and Growth Management. We're here today to hear a variance for to remove a specimen tree. It's section 24.10. Variances from forest conservation priority areas is what we're meeting about today. With me in Chesapeake, Glenn, Planner 4 and Head of the Department of Development Services at the Department of Land Use and Growth Management. Joining us via WebEx, is that name? Joining us also is Deputy County Attorney Neil Murphy. I'll let the applicants introduce themselves and then we'll be underway.
Yes, sir. My name is Mike Bailey and I represent Tanisha Carter. I work for the D.H. Steffens Land Surveying and Engineering firm.
And I am John Hauser. I'm a licensed forester in Maryland, and I am working here on behalf of Utah.
Thank you. So Mr. Bailey, Mr. Hauser, however you want to start your presentation, please go ahead.
So we have prepared, had Mr. Hauser go out and do a forest stand delineation on the property, in which we discovered two specimen trees. One is a 43-inch white oak that's to the front of the property, and the other that we discovered was a 30-inch beech tree that is essentially centered in the center, but maybe to the south of the property up on the knoll. It appears to be the only buildable site for this proposed dwelling based on slopes, septic, etc. We had Mr. Hauser went out and took pictures of the tree based on the slope analysis, soils. Mr. Hauser has determined that the tree meets the specimen tree regulations. However, there is damage to that tree. And I'm going to let Mr. Hauser really speak to the damage, and then I'd probably like to move towards why this tree, or we're requesting this tree to be removed. Mr. Hauser.
The tree in question is a 30-inch American beech tree. Being 30 inches, it qualifies as a specimen tree. On closer examination, I not only determined the diameter of the tree, but I looked at the condition of the tree, to which I found numerous amounts of crown damage, root damage, very possible internal decay, and a propensity towards leak in a direction where if left anywhere near people or property, it could become dangerous in the future. Photographs were taken yesterday of the tree, and they were sent to Brandy, which further explain those conditions of the tree, which I have just pointed out. If this tree were allowed to remain anywhere near the building, I would declare it unsafe.
So that means do we have any questions at this point?
I do, but I'd rather actually wait until you've made your presentation, and then between the two of you, you can answer what I've got as far as questions go.
Okay.
But I do have some about the condition of the tree.
I'm going to pull up a slide, at least I'm going to attempt to pull up a slide. This slide that I've pulled up on the screen, can everybody see it?
Yes.
So this slide represents the 30-inch beech tree, and if you notice, there's a blue circle drawn around it that extends out from the tree to 45 feet. Based on protection of root mass, you calculate the diameter of the tree times 1.5, which gives us the 45 feet. I have taken the proposed house and moved it so that it is outside of the protected area of the root mass of that tree. In addition to this exhibit, it shows a 10-foot blue line around the house, which is a setback requirement for any type of stormwater management that would need to be provided for this dwelling. The hatched area that's grayish in color is exhibiting the 15% slopes. To the rear of the lot, or behind the 30-inch beech tree, there is also a 100-foot stream buffer. In addition to that, based on the existing septic area, which is 10,000 square foot, no stormwater management is allowed to be placed within 25 feet of that easement, which I have also offset and dimensioned at 25 feet. Looking at that picture, there is absolutely no place for me to address stormwater management for this proposed dwelling. So therefore, that is another reason why we're asking for the variance to have that tree removed. I would submit that that completes my presentation of why we request that tree to be removed, and we're open to questions.
Thank you. The illustration that you have up now, has that been submitted to the department?
It has not, although it is in the possession of your department as of this morning.
Yeah, I have it.
I didn't see that when I was reading through the documentation this morning. I saw the regular house plan.
It was not part of the,
It wasn't part of that.
it was not part of the variance application.
We'll put that in there. Some basic information about what's going on here today. What you're requesting is a requirement of state law. It's not something that the county has any control over. It's in the zoning ordinance to comply with state regulations. The commissioners of St. Mary's County can't amend it out of the ordinance if they had wanted to. When we got your variance application, we submitted it to the Department of Natural Resources as we're required to do. And at the conclusion of the hearing, we're required to send the decision up to DNR as well. And they have the ability to appeal the decision if they so desire.
Understood.
So a couple of questions. I didn't have the drawing that you're talking about when I was looking at it today. So I think you've well answered the question of why was the house positioned where it is. You mentioned 15% slopes in your presentation. Do I understand that 25% slopes aren't involved?
No, well, the 25% slopes are located approximately where the Charles D. Herbert and Lisa R. Carter label is on the plan, as well as at the rear of the property, it's labeled and identified with plus symbols with a different style of a hatch.
But they're not impacting the location of the house with respect to the tree, if I understand correctly.
Not the 25%, no.
I also see the septic reserve area. I understand that the health department has approved the plan, which would have meant that you've had perks done I don't see them on the illustration here, but where were the successful perks for the septic system located in relation to the tree?
So they would be to the east tree, and they're identified with circles with half the circles filled in, and they're labeled A, B, and C.
So one of
A
the,
being
go ahead, sorry.
A being the perk A would be right next or probably 10 feet off of the bearing that's listed for the sideline at south. I believe it's 07-1703 west. And then perk B would be half the distance between the proposed or the 30-inch beech tree and that perk A.
Mr. Hauser, in your report, you mentioned the critical root zone, and Mr. Bailey's discussed 1.5 times the inches of DBH of the tree being translated into feet to give a 45-foot radius around the tree. Could you explain what the critical root zone actually is?
That dimension is right out of the Forest Conservation Manual from the state of Maryland. And for specimen trees, that is the minimum amount of critical root zones to be considered during any type of development or disturbance around the tree. When in fact the critical root zone usually extends beyond that. But for purposes of the ordinance, that is what is provided and that is what we use. Even though the critical root zone for the tree is 45 feet, extending from the bole of the tree is much taller than that. The tree, in my estimation, is between 70 and 80 feet tall, with a definite in a northerly direction which points it towards the house. Whether it's the existing footprint that was requested or the what-if footprint that I just showed you. If that tree were to fall over or a large section of the ground were to come off, in all likelihood it would come off and still impact a house or a portion of the house. Does that answer your question, sir?
Well, you went a little bit beyond what I was asking, which was just to describe what the critical root zone is. What I think you said was critical root zone is defined in the forestry manual, and that's what you go by.
Yes, sir.
Am I correct in that or not?
That is correct.
In a letter that you wrote on December 28th, you said that the construction would disturb more than 30% of the critical root zone. Is 30% an important percentage to be aware of?
Yes, it is, sir. That 30% is also defined in the Forest Conservation Manual.
And what does the manual say? You didn't provide a reference for that, and I don't have the manual in front of me. So if you...
The manual states that at anything in excess of 30%, the tree should be considered for removal.
Perhaps at the end of this, you can photocopy that page and email it to us so we can include that in the record?
I definitely can. Yes, sir.
You also describe in your letter, pretty much like you've testified here today, that the tree has damage to the crown, trunk scars, injuries to the exposed roots. How do these affect?
Yes.
How do these affect the tree's health? And is this combination fatal? In other words, if if the house weren't built, if the land wasn't disturbed, would these injuries that you've discovered mean the tree is declining and would soon be dead?
If no house were to be built, it's unknown how long the tree would live and last. I've been in the business for 50 years, and there is no set rule as to how soon a tree will die. There are indications as to how long a tree may live, or what indications there might be for how likely a tree is to decline in vigor, or perhaps be susceptible to external forces such as wind throw or high winds. With the combined injuries that are shown on the photograph of the roots and the large scar running down the north side of the trunk of the tree, the loss of branches on the south side of the tree, which provides more weight in the crown on the north side of the tree, that be a tree that I personally would not want to have near my homestead. And because of these conditions, I would not recommend it be retained for around anyone's house.
I'm not sure you stated that as directly as you've just said in your narrative and summary.
What further information do you wish to have?
I think with respect to the tree, you've provided all the information that is necessary to justify the request to remove the tree. Some of it you haven't, that you'll submit after this hearing. The reference in the Forest Conservation Manual, and we'll be sure that we get the plan that Mr. Bailey was showing to include with it. That plan is important because in the ordinance, the applicant has to demonstrate that reasonable efforts have been made to protect specimen trees, and the plan cannot be reasonably altered. Based on what Mr. Bailey's shown today, he did the 45-foot radius and demonstrated that there was no way that you could position the house, given the other constraints on the property, in such a manner that the construction would be out of that 45-foot radius, which, as Mr. Hauser has testified, is defined in the forestry manual. More than 30% of the critical root zone would be damaged, which is also defined in the forestry manual. So that covers that fairly well, I think. There are two standards in the ordinance that also have to be addressed. One is special features of a site or other circumstances such that saving the tree would result in an unwarranted hardship to the applicant. And I believe Mr. Bailey has met that standard by what he's done with that other plan, with that new plan, showing that there's no place to put a reasonably sized house, given the perks that have been done, the sewage reserve area, the stream buffer, and eventually you'll run into the steep slopes, which can't be disturbed in the RPD. The second standard hasn't been addressed, and that is that granting the variance will not adversely affect water quality. So if one or both of you could explain how removing this tree will not adversely affect water quality, I think we'll be done with what we need to discuss today.
So as far as the water quality and addressing whether the tree would have impact, we are providing the appropriate sediment erosion and stormwater management environmental sensitive design criteria for managing all waters coming off the proposed dwelling. There still remains a substantial forest both behind and in front of the proposed limits of disturbance for that dwelling.
I might add that the tree sits on fairly level ground as it is. So any disturbance of the soil related to the removal of the tree would have little bearing on erosion and sedimentation, provided that the sediment and erosion control measures are in effect anyway with an approved sediment control plan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for addressing those standards. As I've said, based on the illustrations that you provided today, plus the photographs that were sent over earlier, your references to the Forest Conservation Manual, you've presented your case and provided justification for removing the tree. So I will approve the variance and send you the decision in writing as soon as I can get it written. Do you have anything else?
Once your letter is written for approval, you made reference, this also has to be sent to the state for them for review. What is the time frame, estimated time frame in these COVID times for something like that to be turned around?
Let me ask Mr. Murphy if he was able to research that this morning and might have some idea of what the statute requires as far as the length of time. Sometimes the agency has a given period of time to respond, and if they don't, it's considered to be granted. But I'm not 100% sure what happens with the tree variance. Do you have the answer to that, Mr. Murphy?
Last thing I didn't hear. Can you say
Do you know if DNR has a given time to respond one way or the other, or else the variance is assumed approved? We don't know the answer to that.
I will send an email and ask.
We'll ask and see if they have a practice or policy that they follow. The only two other variances to remove specimen trees that I've participated in, we haven't heard back once we send up the decision, so I don't know what they did after that.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will provide the information you have requested. And I'll send that information to Brandy, and I'll copy Ms. Bailey and Ms. Carter.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we'll adjourn this hearing.
Have a good day.
You too, Brandy.
You too.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right. Yeah, but Comar does reference it, so, but the Natural Resources Society doesn't. But yeah,
I think I think in our